2 years after holding free and fair elections, Tunisia is still struggling with the transition to democracy. People are blaming the Ennahda-led government for the instability. So could a national dialogue be the answer to Tunisia's problems? And are all still prepared to talk? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Mike Hanna. Protesters outside the Prime Minister's office and thousands more on the streets, all demanding Tunisia's government resign. Wednesday's demonstration took place just hours before the planned start of a national dialogue between the ruling Ennahda party, its allies and opposition groups. In an apparent attempt to disrupt these talks, religious hardliners killed 7 security officers in the city of Sidi Bouzid. And adding to the political pressure is a coalition of secular opposition parties demanding the government step down immediately. In a surprise announcement, the Tunisian Prime Minister Ali Larayed confirmed that the Ennahda-led government would be ready to resign if certain preconditions were met.
Today we renew our commitment to the principle of relinquishing power, or the principle of the government stepping down, in line with different phases of the roadmap. This process aims to promote the success of national dialogue and to prevent the country from falling into a dark abyss.
The political crisis in Tunisia intensified in July when an opposition leader was killed outside his home. Mohamed Brahimi's family blamed the Ennahda party for his murder. Protesters demanded the resignation of the government, but the Prime Minister insisted his government would remain in office. Then in August, the Prime Minister accused an al-Qaeda-linked group, Ansar al-Sharia, of carrying out attacks in Tunisia, including the assassinations of opposition members of parliament. A month later, as the protests continued, Ennahda accepted a roadmap that would see the current government replaced with one run by technocrats. Talks with the opposition on how to proceed had been scheduled to begin on Wednesday, but have now been postponed until Friday. The Ennahda-led government in Tunisia has been feeling the pressure for some time now. A military coup in Egypt raised fears of a backlash against governments perceived as Islamist in the region, while over in neighbouring Libya, the government's failure there to contain militias and other armed groups is having a spillover effect. Fighters operating in Tunisia have used the chaos in Libya to obtain weapons and training. And in the 2 years since Ennahda won parliamentary elections, there are many who feel it's not delivered on its promises, including the pledge of economic growth. Well, for more on this, I'm joined by our 3 guests. From Tunis, Nauman Ferry, a member of parliament and founder of the opposition Afaq Tunis party. He's also a permanent member of the National Dialogue. From London, Yusra Ghannouchi, the international spokeswoman for Tunisia's ruling Ennahda party. And from Paris, Amel Boubaker, a visiting fellow at the Brookings Doha Centre and a specialist on North Africa. Welcome to you all. Let's begin with Nauman Ferry. You've been spending late nights recently setting up the national dialogue. It's been postponed yet again. Is it going to happen?
I hope so. It depends on what the head of government says, because Ennahda party president, Mr. Ghannouchi, signed the roadmap, excuse me, the same way we did. And as the starting point of this national dialogue, the head of government, Mr. Larayed, should state clearly that he will follow strictly the roadmap. His declaration yesterday was first ambiguous, very ambiguous, then succeeded by the President of the Republic, our President, who said something totally against the roadmap. So it will happen. It has to happen. We have no other choice. However, it depends on the head of the government, who belongs to the Ennahda party, of course.
Well, there we've got the spokesperson, Yusra Ghannouchi. Is there a stumbling block? Is there a problem from your party and from the government it heads point of view?
Ennahda party, as well as all the parties in the national, in the coalition government, have expressed and stated clearly and reiterated their commitment to this national dialogue. and have made many compromises already, including expressing clearly the willingness to leave power. However, what is a stumbling block is clearly parties boycotting the national dialogue, or pulling out of the national dialogue, or staging sit-ins and protests, and also the withdrawn members of the Assembly who need to return to the Assembly in order for us to accelerate the work as required by the roadmap in order to complete this transition phase.
Well, Amal Boubacar, as an outside analyst looking in, what do you see has been the stumbling block to actually just getting this national dialogue going?
I think that above the issue of the roadmap, the current difficulties that we are witnessing are the sign of three different various visions on the transition and the direction that this transition should take. First, you have young people from the countryside for whom the revolution is not finished and the revolution should be ongoing, according to the fact that the situation has not improved, so their protests are repressed and their socio-economic conditions has not improved. Then you have the position of the opposition, who think that they have a role to correct the transition, and they are using street protests mainly in order to do so. But the problem is that they are not doing it over their obsession for Nahda and for the government. They are not actually offering new ideas or new program. And then you have Nahda's position, who think that actually the revolution is over. Elections took place, they have been elected, they have the legitimacy. So, but here also the problem is that Nahda has used its position at in the government mainly in order to reinforce his own position as a party in front of other opponents, instead of tackling the real problems like unemployment, security issues, and socio-economic demands. So these three different visions of the transition and how what the role of the revolution should be and the direction that the transition should take is obviously at the core of the current difficulties the national dialogues are experiencing.
Well, we'll get on to that last point in a moment, but Yusra Ghanouchi, just to clarify for us, we understand that the party, or the Prime Minister at least of the government, has said, yes, we are willing to stand down, but first there has to be an agreement on an electoral commission, there has to be an agreement on an election date, and there has to be an agreement on the Constitution. Is that correct?
Yes, and this is the logical position. If we are really interested in accelerating the work and completing the transition and really having elections as soon as possible, then we should agree these things. Those who are not perhaps interested in the acceleration of the work and holding the elections as soon as possible are not so much interested in this part of the national dialogue and are only focusing on the government's resignation. We have clearly expressed our commitment to leaving power, as well as the other two parties who are part of the coalition government. However, we want the two processes, the governmental process and the constituent process, to progress as soon as possible, as quickly as possible, so as to really end this phase of transition to democracy and have a stable democratic state as soon as possible in Tunisia.
Now, Benferri, some would say that's a reasonable demand by the government to know when elections will be held before it steps down, in your view?
Absolutely. We are all looking for the election as soon as possible. But first, let me encode what Mrs. Ghanouchi or Ms. Ghanouchi had said. What she was really saying, that we signed the roadmap, however, we don't agree with it. Because the roadmap says clearly there was 4 milestones. After the first milestone, we get the new election committee. Then we agree on the new head of government. Following a week later, we get the we get the electoral law agreed. A week later, we get physically the head of government to resign, and a week later, we finalize the constitution. That's what the roadmap says, and that's what all agreed to do. However, although Nahda president, which happened to be the father of Mrs. Ghanouchi here present, after some pressure agreed to that and signed the document. However, the head of government, for all this to start, the head of government has to say, I accept the roadmap and I will follow it strictly. What he said yesterday is, I accept the roadmap, but really I don't accept it because I want something different. And we stayed until 12 o'clock last night, from 5 or 6 o'clock until 12 o'clock last night, debating this, and we all agreed, and including Nahda, agreed that this is not the start of the dialogue, because the head of government did not fulfill his position. But while we are doing this, there are Tunisian people who are being killed by the terrorism and by terrorists, and these terrorists who has been said to be who has been let's say the accountability for the situation obviously goes to the government, who from the start did not react properly to these terrorists. When they started in the beginning, a year and a half ago, when they started with political violence, and we were saying to the head of government, Mr. Jbeli at that time, still the same party, that he needs to react properly to with these guys and stop this fire, otherwise the fire will go into the forest and it will be much more difficult to shut it down. The answer we get with the Nahda party, these are our brothers. They think they think differently. We just need to deal with them, discuss with them, etc., etc. And as a result, I'm not saying that the Nahda has nurturing the violence, but because some of people think that way, I don't think that way. But I think that the accountability for the violence right now in Tunisia goes directly to the government, who is led by Nahda, of course.
Well, I'm going to go to the Ennahda spokesperson in a moment, but let's just take a step back at the moment and take a look at who are the main political players in Tunisia. Ennahda, as we've heard, is a ruling party. Largely moderate, it says it advocates democracy, recognizes political pluralism and backs dialogue with the West. Its basic premise is that democracy is compatible with religion. The opposition is made up of a coalition headed by the Nida Tunis party, which is founded by a former Prime Minister, Baji Qaid al-Sebsi. They insist that Tunisia's secular forces have to unite to counter the dominance of Ennahda. And then there's Ansar al-Sharia, the group with links to al-Qaeda, which wants Islamic law implemented across Tunisia, as do other hardline Salafist movements. Well, we heard there, Yusra Ghanouchi, the claims from the opposition. There's also been the critics who contend that Ennahda itself is a party split between moderate and not so moderate factions. The competition between these elements is a constant threat and has been a constant threat to the country. Your response to that?
There have always been, in the Tunisian media especially, continuous speculations about Nahda's different, alleged divisions and wings. This is all speculations that have no foundation in reality, and Ennahda is united. Its positions are very clear. It has always condemned violence of any form and whoever is the perpetrator. As in relation to Nouman Fihri's allegations about this government's lack of response to terrorism. Terrorism is a problem that has existed in Tunisia and has emerged in Tunisia under Ben Ali's repression, and has also hit Tunisians and the Tunisian army and National Guard and police before the elections and after the elections, as well as the fact that obviously it exists in other countries, including democratic countries. The government is responsible for combating this, and it is doing its best, and it's progressing well against a very challenging situation. As we know, the regional situation is very unstable, whether it is in Libya or to the south in Mali, or the political situation in Egypt, etc. And this poses great challenges for the Tunisian government. And the Tunisian government is developing its capacities and combating this dangerous threat to Tunisia. But what we are seeing, as well as violence, political violence, is a clear pattern of not mere isolated incidents, but rather terrorism and political violence and assassinations striking whenever we are on the verge of achieving a breakthrough in the political crisis.
I'll get back to that in a moment, if I may, Yusra Ghanouchi. I just want to go to Amal Boubacar on that particular issue. Do you think that the government has got to accept responsibility for what has been at times a breakdown in security?
I think that security issues, namely murderings, assassinations and terrorism, have been turning points in the consolidation of the transition. Now, when it comes to Nahda, I think that first Nahda has still to meet it up with security forces, and that's also one of the reasons why Nahda is not able to handle, or has not been able to handle, the security situation that well. Second, I think also that what was very shocking, for example, yesterday to a lot of Tunisians, is that Nahda has failed to show sympathy and to show that the party is in solidarity when it comes to the terrorism issue with the rest of Tunisian society. Yesterday, while the Nahda demonstrators were actually showing support for the party, while the rest of the society was mourning the killed policemen. Now there are two dangers actually when it comes to the security situation. First, if the security issue still continue to postpone national dialogue and consolidation of the transition, there's a risk to see people just disengaging from institutional politics and think that street protest is the only way to solve political issues and problems. The second problem is also, the second danger is also to see old members of the old regime are in partnership with employer unions and the opposition, using the security issue as a pretext to have the country in the right tracks and just put by side social struggles in the name of preserving security. So it is the responsibility of Nahda to show more solidarity with the Tunisian people and the Tunisian society when it comes to terrorism, but it is also the responsibility of the opposition to not use the security situation only to target Nahda as an opponent or as another party they are in competition with.
Well, Yusra Ghanouchi, I know that there's going to be some points you want to answer there, but first I would like to go to Namen Ferry, if I may. Namen Ferry, do you think that there are elements within the country intent on preventing this dialogue far beyond political concerns?
So clearly, I didn't believe in this at the start, to be absolutely frank with you and blunt, if you like. But as it is true that on 25th of July, when we were close to finalize the election of the election committee, somebody was killed, and yesterday the terrorism started when we were starting the national dialogue. However, definitely there are people who are not who the stability of this country are not in their favor. These people are probably I will not go to the conspiracy theory and speak about the external forces. If I'll keep myself to the internal forces, because we have no control on externals, that people who are doing contraband, who illegal trafficking, who are very close to the extremists, to the fundamentalists, to the Salafists, to the jihadists, because they are smuggling arms, and they are smuggling arms, drugs, food and stuff. And these people, these jihadists are very close, obviously, to the Salafists, who are not necessarily jihadists, who themselves very close to some ultra-conservative members of Nahda. So these definitely the people, the smugglers as well, and the terrorists have no interest in this country's stability. The question is, there are two questions here. The first question, could we have done better before? The answer is yes, and that's why I was mentioning the lack of reactivity from Nahda due to the closed.
Well, let's at this point go straight to Yusra Ghanouchi with that question that you asked Namen Ferry. Yusra Ghanouchi, could Ennahda have done better?
First, I'd like to make the point again that the government is made up of three parties, as well as almost half of the government is independent, are independent ministers. So it's better to talk about the government when we talk about performance in terms of security, etc. However, all the parties involved and the government, of course, could have done better, and that's always true of any government. However, we have to really realize the great challenges. You know, we are working not only in a post-revolution context where the state has been weakened, the police force has been weakened, and in a regional context that is extremely challenging. And what we need is for everyone to be united against terrorism rather than throw around baseless allegations. This is a real threat that is threatening all of us, and it should be a priority. Mr. Al-Arayed has said this yesterday and has said that the government will continue to face this challenge and to do its best until it steps down and a new government takes over. And he said that very clearly and has said many times regarding stepping down. So I really think that it is time for everyone to sit around the table, talk about the details of what's going to happen. I mean, Mr. Fahri has talked about the detailed nature of the roadmap. That is true. However, the preparatory sessions that have taken place over the last 2 weeks have shown that there are shortcomings, that there are points that need to be clarified, and this is what's going to happen over the next few weeks. So the idea is not just to agree everything now and sign it and that's it. There would be no need for 3 weeks.
Abu Bakr, I've been talking about the present, but there's also that concern about the past, elements of the past that may still be intent on disrupting this democratic process.
Well, I think that the problem is also about the monopolization of the consolidation of transition by political parties. I mean, we have clearly political parties that are not in line with the revolution of the spirit of the revolution. We have parties who have the same leaders since 10 years. We have parties which are in a face-to-face with each other, excluding the rest of civil society. I think that rather to focus on a minimal consensus, they should focus on what they do not want. And namely, this is violence, this is also corruption, this is the lack of accountability and transitional justice. So rather to focus only on the architecture of the transition, which is important, but not only focusing on this national dialogue, they should focus also on the real fight and tackling what Tunisian people are asking for the biggest since the starting of the revolution: socio-economic issues, unemployment and security issues. And they can do that without the help of the Tunisian population. So they should also try to find new participatory and consultatory mechanisms in order to involve Tunisian civil society rather than
Nabil
just...
Ferri, do you think that there is enough that people agree on rather than what people do not agree on to push this process forward?
I think there is enough. First, I would like to say that I agree with every single word which was said by the guest just before me. And for a new leadership to political parties needs to change. That political leaders need to be closer to what people want. One thing we need, I must say here, that the reason why Mr. Al-Arayed needs to go before we start the a proper tackling of the terrorism, because he was too close to the people being terrorists right now when he was head of a Minister of Interior, where we requested that the Minister of Interior become independent, and then now he's the head of government. So we cannot build on Mr. Al-Arayed's legacy. Therefore, we have no issue to work with the Nahda, we have no issue to work with anybody, as long as we need to take out the legacy of the past. Not only the past 40 years, for example, the Nahda has the leadership, the same leadership for the last 30 or 40 years, but also the people who will need to enter this, who will need to unite the country around them to tackle the security and the economical issue, needs to have no legacy to avoid issues.
Well, that is what the people of Tunisia conducted a revolution for. That's all time that we have time for. But thanks to all my guests, Nabil Ferri, Yusra Ghannouchi and Amel Boubacar. And thank you very much for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. If you want to send us your feedback, just email your thoughts to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. I'm Mike Hanna. Thanks for watching, and goodbye for now.